When talking about how much the Cleveland Browns have upgraded the roster, our guest today brought up probably the best scenario that you could to understand the growth and change of this roster. Just looking at what left. Jared Mueller returns to Locked On Browns with host Jeff Lloyd on the latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we appreciate the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen. Well over 6,000 subscribers now. You guys are the absolute best to the new traffic. I suggest you join the everyday crowd. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. If you remember back in the day, in the infancy of the Locked On Browns podcast, there was one original host of the Locked On Browns podcast, Mr. Jared Mueller. Jared returns here today. Jared is up to a ton now. Dog Pound Daily. I believe there is not a Cleveland Browns news outlet that Jared has not been at some point covering the Cleveland Browns. And it almost seems every time Jared's maybe going to step away from the game for a little bit, here comes somebody else saying, well, why don't you come work with us? And Mr. Mueller goes off again. Jared, first off, it's obviously great to always sit down with you. It's great to have you back. And, I guess for what it was, maybe first 49, 50 episodes, you were a huge part of now where we're at 1,500. Those first 48, 49 were the key ones. They were the building blocks.
Hey, they were the building blocks to make you be okay with it. And yeah, you're right. So Dog Pound Daily, the OBR, Browns Wire, now Dawgs By Nature. I've hit a little bit of everything, and Locked On Browns was, Daddy's home.
Quite a collection of staffed shirts in the Mueller closet, probably. But when I was discussing with Jared here that we were, going to do this episode, and, you always try to make your guests look good and make sure you're going to approach a topic that they want to speak on. And this one kind of really resonated with me. This might be and guys, I see you, the Ravens fans, the Bengals fans. When you guys leave the comments, it's kind of a dead giveaway, but hey, guess what? You're watching, so you're appreciated. For the naysayers that don't believe this Cleveland Browns roster is essentially ready to compete or that it's not that improved, take a look at some of the names that are no longer here and even guys that are still here where maybe they were in the pecking order of the positional room they were in last year as opposed to where they are now, Jared.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about just where the roster was last year. And, even starting with defensive end, Chase Winovich and Jadeveon Clowney, those are the two guys they lost, right? Like, it's just they got nothing.
3 sacks?
Yeah,
three?
There's
I think it's
so
3
little
sacks.
out of them, right? And so then you go, oh, Darius Smith and Okoronkwo. Like, it's one of those things that helps you kind of put in perspective where the roster is, especially when you look back at last year. Coaching cost this team 3 games, 2 games, 4 games, whatever you want to call it. So if bad coaching on defense and special teams, which hopefully has improved with Bubba Ventrone and Jim Schwartz, cost the team 2, 3, or 4 games, well, then you even add this roster upgrade, and it really kind of tells you where the team should be. And that's assuming Deshaun Watson is only as good as Jacoby Brissett.
Now, and I go back to a year ago. Now we're coming off the 2022 draft, and basically everybody, that I had talked to, what we had felt is like just an example to this. Hey, Alex Wright, here's an interesting guy. It's going to take some time. And then you flash forward to week 3, Alex Wright is getting 40 snaps. He's not. Well, no, this was, so here it is in year 2. He's essentially hopefully going to get what he should have in year 1. If he ends up getting more playing time through earning it, fantastic. But here's this big ball of clay. And now, you brought in a defensive line minded coach. So obviously you couldn't tell Jim Schwartz, hey, thanks, and I hope you didn't read the fine print because we're going to give you the same cast of cronies. You go out, you get a Tomlinson. Obviously, you go out, you get an Okoronkwo, which everybody was ecstatic right there. And then you go into the draft. Isaiah McGuire. Oh, wow. I mean, look, we got 5 edges already on the roster. All right. You know what? I don't know if we did just well enough. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, we'll pull the trigger. We'll bring in Darius Smith as well. So you look at it there and the depth of that defensive line for a guy who specializes in defensive line play. And, you can do whatever you want. Once you get to nickel and dime, do you want to play more pass rushers? Because you can certainly, take the big boys off the field. But I think for me, that is where you truly look at it. And I love that we still get the annual Jordan Elliott. It's almost like it's his birthday party right around OTAs because everybody tries to lift him up one more time. And, as I forget who it was the other day, it might have been Corey Kinnan. He must be a hell of a guy, Jordan Elliott, because nobody ever passes on the question. Everybody wants to get the opportunity to sing his praises. But you look at how bad and piss poor this defensive line was last year. But look, even just on the paper aspect of it, name factor alone, it's already, it's almost a complete 180.
It really is. And I think what's interesting, and I think it's hard for us to wrap our head around, is we also have to figure out how bad Joe Woods was as a coach to affect some of the players that were here, right? So I'm not a big Jordan Elliott fan. Obviously, he's pretty much guaranteed to make the roster after his contract adjustment. But how much did Joe Woods make that even worse, right? But yeah, I think the defensive line is such an interesting place where, Siaki Ika, that's a big boy, right? Let's in a wide 9, we need some guys that are going to take.
They have an opportunity to put 700 pounds of defensive tackle on the field in one shot. That's pretty impressive.
And it'll be interesting. I wonder if someone like Okoronkwo, even Darius Smith, or even Myles Garrett at times are going to be a version of a linebacker. So they really have 5 defensive linemen on the field just for creativity purposes. I think Okoronkwo can drop a little bit. I think Smith can drop a little bit. I don't want Myles ever dropping.
But you could have Myles shade as a linebacker and basically say, I'm just waiting till I see which gap I'm going to shoot.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have a lot of flexibility there. I think it sets up, again, you could say, okay, they may have overpaid for Tomlinson. Darius Smith has had he kind of falls off as the end of the year, some locker room kind of issues or whatever. But you can't say they're not an improvement, right? You can't say that going from Chase Winovich and Jadeveon Clowney and Chris Odom to right. I mean, obviously he didn't get to play. Stephen Weatherly didn't get to play. Like the defensive end. Weatherly. Yeah. I mean, it's just an ugly group, right? So just as you look at those upgrades, and I love what you bring up about Alex Wright, I forget about Isaiah McGuire a lot. Like that, for some reason, it's like, oh yeah, they did draft him as well. But Alex Wright as your 4th defensive end, and I love that for him. And put him in at defensive tackle sometimes if you need to or whatever. Just that added depth is just going to be so crazy important for a team that wants to win long term, right? And so they do want to spell Myles. They do want to spell Darius. They actually have the opportunity to do that on the defensive line. And that's something that Jim Schwartz loves. He wants to rotate a bunch of players there. So I think it just, again, they fed their defensive coordinator exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, and you had no. I mean, once the handshake was done and the ink was put to paper, all right, we better get to work here because this is you don't hire a guy with a reputation like that and essentially just do him wrong. You don't look for a great barbecue guy and say, okay, well, what kind of Chinese recipes can you make for us? Right. So for Jim Schwartz and wanting this to succeed, and the question obviously with the state of the contracts for the general manager, the state of the contract for the head coach. They need this to hit, and they need to fully invest in it. And, once you're already $230 million into your quarterback, you might as well make sure everything else is tied down too, because, you can't just expect, and especially with the layoff and what we saw last year. And then, we don't know what version of Deshaun Watson there truly is left, which I think we all kind of have an idea, but you can't be certain. So you got to cover your bases everywhere else. Speaking of the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, we're going to flip it up here. We're going to the offensive side of the ball here. It's going to be certainly a different offense here in 2023. Some of the things that we've grown accustomed to and what this offense does well will still remain, but we're certainly going to see some different aspects of it here. Jeff Lloyd, joined by Jared Mueller on your latest Locked On Browns. FanDuel, You guys know the drill. It is MLB baseball season, and you have an opportunity to take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Continuing on here, again, your latest Locked On Browns, joined by original host, currently Dog Pound Daily, Mr. Jared Mueller. As always, the everydayers.
Dogs by nature.
Dogs by nature. See, but you've been to too many of them now.
I've been to too many places. I got you.
That is definitely. What do we start throwing out acronyms now?
I know.
But
right?
to the legion of everydayers, obviously, you guys are basically the fabric on what the Locked On Podcast Network is built on, certainly Locked On Browns. Appreciate you all. And for all of you, why don't you join the everydayers? Make Locked On Browns your first listen by subscribing to the YouTube channel, notifications on, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. And we did an episode about a week or two back, Jared, and basically it was, look, Tomlinson, great, Darius Smith, Okoronkwo, Thornhill, Elijah Moore. All of these moves are fantastic. They are upgrades. But the biggest move that can be made by this franchise, or be done by this franchise, is Deshaun Watson returning back to the player in 2020 that many felt was probably a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think this Browns roster with Brian Hoyer could be a fringe playoff contender. I think it's that good of a roster, and I think they showed it over the last couple of years. Even when Baker was hurt, even when Baker wasn't playing great, they were still a playoff contender. So even last year with Jacoby Brissett and a bad Deshaun Watson, they were a kick against the Chargers. I'm going to always call them San Diego in my head, at least. They were the Jets game. They were the Falcons game. They were the Saints game. All 4 games that they should have won. 2 of them they literally should have won. Make a kick, recover an onside kick, no big deal. The other 2 they still should have won with bad quarterback play. So Watson really can take it over the top. But I think this year is about being really good. Great might wait until next year. They don't need him to be great to make the playoffs, but if he's great, they are a Super Bowl contender. I do love all the haters, and I don't mean haters. Well, screw it. I mean haters. I love all the haters that are like, well, what was his record back 2020? Weren't they like 4-12? Move the goalpost all you want. Deshaun Watson was a great quarterback. He was a very good prospect coming out of Clemson. He was a great.
It was an MVP season. If his team wasn't 4-12, it was an MVP season.
Absolutely, and that team was not very good. Like there was not a lot of talent on that roster, and maybe not so great coaching as well. So, again, you move the goalpost. But if Deshaun Watson is good, the Browns are really good. If Deshaun Watson is great, the Browns are in a place that they could contend for the Super Bowl. I'm not going to pretend like anybody in the AFC this year. There's just a certainty, right? Patrick Mahomes, everybody, all the next 8 quarterbacks are good to great, and they're all competing to try to beat Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. But the Browns will be good enough to be in that conversation.
And there's no question about it. And, and the other one is, for everybody who keeps going on with this, you realize DeAndre Hopkins was not in Houston in 2020. So you need to talk about what he did. And no, he didn't have DeAndre Hopkins. So everybody who wants to bring back that relationship that hasn't been a relationship for 4 years, kind of like Ross and Rachel getting together at the end of Friends. So let's just stop with that. But you look at it, and this is what I'm excited for, though. When you originally made the move, and to understand, they couldn't just go out, week 13 last year once Deshaun came back. And all right. And they did try. They did. I mean, they really tried to play a different offense. And then they realized, okay, well, we at least have to go with what the guys are familiar with, and we'll have Deshaun work his way in here.
Right.
And then we can kind of maneuver it in the offseason. But I'm excited for a team that looks like essentially they're going to be a pass-first football team. I'm excited that I think Nick Chubb, there's going to be times where Nick Chubb is going to be an afterthought defensively, which I think is hysterical. There's times where they are going to be able to save some hits on Nick Chubb because you know what? We don't have to hand it to you. We'll throw it to you. And guess what? You know, the safeties, the 700 pounds of defensive line, yeah, they can hurt you. But you and a safety, that's always been a great, great matchup. And then just working in whatever this wide receiver room can be. I'm on record. I think there is a clear path that Elijah Moore could easily lead this team in receptions because there are so many gimme layups that you can do with him because of Amari, because of Donovan, because David, because of Nick Chubb. I'm really excited. And, I think for Coach Stefanski, this is probably the most difficult test he's had because you're foolish not to see what's there and what you possibly have. But it's a whole other thing to basically make it all happen.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember for Browns fans who don't live and breathe the details like you and I do is Stefanski was not a wide zone guy until basically his last year in Minnesota. So he has a lot of experience in a lot of different – it's one of the reasons he brought in Musgrave, right? Musgrave's offense at Cal was great running the ball out of the shotgun and the pistol. And that's something that Stefanski has history with in the NFL, right? So he has a history with a variety of different offenses. He just kind of fell in love with what he was able to do with Kubiak and understanding that offense. When he got to Cleveland, okay, Baker, maybe a little limited. Maybe we could kind of rein him in a little bit and make something of it. But now you can unlock a real wide open offense that isn't limited and can't be taken out by a really good 3-4 defense, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, it's a really exciting place to be, but just remember that Stefanski isn't married to the wide zone. He's just been married to it recently, but he's got a decade plus experience in other systems as a coach. So it's a lot that he can pull from.
And, and for him, look, this, and certainly, if it doesn't go well, there's going to be questions, but that's the joy of it. He can literally try to, and not totally say it's a new offense, but having it be somewhat of a new offense. And, it'll start, with being the ability to spread the ball around. I mean, there's going to be times where you have players on the field. Donovan Peoples-Jones could be the fifth option the defense are watching. David Njoku could be the fifth option. Nick Chubb could be the fifth option. And just putting that much great talent on the field together, granted, you have to play clean. You have to, no mistakes. You can't turn the ball over. And this is one I keep talking about is, the Browns averaged 21.2 points per game last year, which wasn't bad seeing you had a backup quarterback play 11 games. Problem is the team that won the division, the Cincinnati Bengals, scored 4.5 points more per game. And then you look at the Super Bowl teams, Kansas City Chiefs at a full 8 points more per ball game. The Eagles right behind at 29.1. This offense, you need to be efficient and you need to find a way. Because, I mean, in the literal sense, you're saying you need to find a way to get 2 more points per quarter every single ball game. It's crazy to think that, but it's also that crazy to believe that they could be capable of it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, just looking at overall, how do you spread a defense out, right? Like, how do you make it work? I need 4 wide receivers on the field with Nick Chubb. Let the box be real light, right? Like, I've never understood running from kind of a bunch personnel.
Like, they play the Ravens, and they're so willing to say, "Oh, well, Nick's going to get 4 carries where there's 5 people in the backfield, and if he gets a 0-yard gain, we're going to applaud him."
Right. It just doesn't make sense. And again, in the end, the goal is winning. Weather is rarely an actual problem in Cleveland. Yes, I know last year they had the New Orleans game. Yes, I know the Buffalo game that was supposed to be in Buffalo got moved to Detroit. But it's just so rare that weather is a big issue in Cleveland or many of the actual cities that you can't go, well, we want to run the football in case we have one bad weather game.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get to the freaking playoffs, and you have to get to the playoffs in the NFL by scoring points. There is no other way to do it at this point in time. So I'm really excited to look at, what happens when you've got Elijah Moore as the one running back on the field. That's a whole lot of fun for me right there. Hayden Grove, I'm not sure if he would get in trouble for it, but he tweeted out that they were practicing the option.
Yep.
The flipping option, dude. Like, let me have a triple option where you could either hand it off to Nick Chubb, pitch it to Elijah Moore, or Deshaun Watson can run the ball to the wide side of the field. I don't know what a defense is going to do. Somebody might get hit. Yeah, that could happen. I think the other thing to realize for Browns fans, and just accepting it, is Deshaun Watson's going to take a few extra sacks. He always does. He tries to hold on to the ball. He tries to make big plays, all that stuff. So it's another reason you need to be able to throw the ball, is every once in a while, he's going to put you behind the sticks. He's also going to get you those first downs, get you those big plays. He's going to pull out the bow and arrow, and he's going to shoot that arrow, right? Like, so it's just understanding that when you have big play guys, Patrick Mahomes sometimes runs around and gets sacked. Josh Allen sometimes throws the ball left-handed, right? Like, you're going to have some of that as you're trying to make those bigger plays, but that's a part of the story.
And, you know, and getting back to you, or even how about this, with a two-back set of, you know, flanking Deshaun Watson is Nick Chubb and Elijah Moore. So where are all the eyes in the stadium going to be? On Elijah Moore in the backfield. So you pump a little fake over, you turn around, you've got the screen set up. There's Batonio Teller waiting in front of Nick Chubb. And, I mean, there's a lot of choice opportunities here for this offense, because you're now to the, you know, and still Amari Cooper, and I love it because he is literally the wide receiver equivalent of Nick Chubb. He is. The guy just doesn't talk. He's just quiet, just goes out there like Novocaine every week, gets the job done. And then there's still Donovan. And then you know, David Bell is going to find a way to move some chains here in third down situations. You know, you have the rookie in Cedric Tillman, who's the biggest guy in the room. It's a whole different animal that this wide receiver room doesn't have. And then guess what? If we need, because we feel we can expose you deep, I've got this guy who was basically an Olympic speedster in Marquise Goodwin, who's had his moments of obviously, you know, scaring the living deaths out of defenses over the years. You know, for Coach Stefanski, I mean, I think the biggest thing is going to be, I hope I don't screw it up, because I got a lot going on here, you know. And the thing is, maybe, you know, just, you know, basically, you know, don't be like the kid with the free pass into the candy store and, you know, just eat too much and get yourself a bellyache, because otherwise, you know, there should be a lot of opportunity here for a lot of yards and a lot of points for this Cleveland Browns offense. We're going to get to a little bit more on the defense here. Obviously, a lot of new moving parts, but the key to it is we always talk about defenses, and it takes a little time to develop. I'm not sure the Browns are going to have that time coming out the box. Jeff Lloyd, Jared Mueller, your latest Locked On Browns. As we continue here, closing out the week on Locked On Browns, again, thank you, everybody. If you didn't get to the Brett Coleman episode yesterday, Brett was fantastic. There was only so much we could put in the episode, and some of the nuggets Brett was kind enough to give to me. Those ones stay with me. Sorry, guys, on that one. But, you know, look, it is a very, very interesting team to follow this year, and we've gone through a bunch of this, you know, where a lot of people, I can't do it again. I can't buy in again because we've been down this road before. 2019, 2021, maybe 2022. Look, it's my job. I got to buy in. It's what I do here. I got to make sure you people come back every day. So if I told you they were going to stink, I don't think anybody's going to show them back up every day. But become like the everydayers, Locked On Browns. Subscribe on the YouTube channel. Of course, notifications on, so when the content drops, you're all there to absorb it. Always available, always free, wherever you get your content. Jeez, good Lord. You know it's Friday now. Mr. Mueller. Now, this is what I want to close with. And a lot of newness on defense, obviously, and all of this. And this is what doesn't concern me so much. It's not so much the defensive line play. It's not. Because defensive line play is kind of self-explanatory. You hit your gap, you hit your gap, you hit your gap. The linebackers, it's a weird mix of, you know, Sione Takitaki. If you want to say he was probably the best Browns linebacker last year, I wouldn't argue with you. But he has the most serious injury out of all of them coming back. Anthony Walker, you're getting to that point where, you know, the injury, can you get it all back? You know, JOK, I think life's about to get a lot easier for JOK within this defense. And then certainly not talked about enough, you know, when you need a free safety, you should sign a free safety. Not a guy, and no, if and you know, the Browns will always take as much blame on John Johnson III as John Johnson III himself should. You signed a guy and then basically asked him to do things that you'd never seen him do before. And it didn't. Is it a shock it didn't work? No. And then there were times where, hey, look, John Johnson's all over the field and he's making plays. Oh, well, let's put him on the roof. It's not working out very well on a roof. Oh, wait, that's not what he does. But for all of this to come together, and this is the key to it, Jared, because with this first 5 in 6, And I'll be honest, like you have no idea what Tennessee is. I know a lot of people want to leave Tennessee on the, dead on the. I already saw now. Is Tennessee already angling, to get Willie? It's like, well, yes, they drafted Will Levis with the sole purpose of we'll use the second round pick so we can get the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. It's not how it works in this business, kids.
Now Marvin Harrison, on the other hand,
that's an interesting one.
Nelly.
Well, that's good though, because if anybody's a big Treylon Burks fan, he'll probably become available. Well, he'll be out of Tennessee. But you got it's Cincinnati, it's Pittsburgh, obviously Tennessee, Baltimore, and I will always say this: this is the one nobody talks about in this first 5-game stretch. Is the Niners, because guess what? If there's any cracking in your foundation, or you're not sure how ready your team is, or are we physical enough, are we tough enough? San Francisco Niners absolutely, they will curb stomp you. That's the type of team that they are. So this defense, and it's always been, a traditional saying and a traditional understanding that it takes defenses a little bit more time. The Browns do not have that time.
No, I don't think they have that time. And I also am very worried about the injuries. And really, when we talk about the linebacker position, Walker should be ready. But is he calling plays this year? It was John Johnson. It was him. It was who was going to be. I don't think it's going to be Thornhill.
It was Sione for a guy. It was Sione for a couple starts. Right. He was the Bengal game. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do wonder at some point, does JOK actually which would be interesting, right? Is that something where JOK makes more sense to be the offensive or the defensive play caller? Walker's just never healthy. JOK needs to be on the field every down anyways. Is there something there where it actually makes sense for JOK to take that over? That's what I'm really going to be interested in, is see who's really leading this team. Do we see a lot of 3 safety with Rodney McLeod, who knows the defense really well? And does he become kind of more of the de facto, not maybe play caller, but get everybody together? They do have to be ready. You're right about San Francisco. I don't care who their quarterback is. Similar to what I think about the Browns roster, except I think Kyle Shanahan's the best play caller in the NFL. Sure. So it doesn't matter who their quarterback is. That defensive line is ridiculous. And Kyle Shanahan, again, made Brian Hoyer and Brock Purdy look ridiculously good. So I don't know if you can be ready. And I think that's where it's going to get really, really interesting for Schwartz is, do they just say, you know what, we know that we're going to have to outscore teams, so we're just going to go after the quarterback, right? Or we're just going to stop the run, whatever it is, and really just say, hey, in this specific game, we're going to focus on this and taking this away, and we need that offense to really carry us. Maybe not against Pittsburgh, because I don't think Tiny Hands is really the guy. But otherwise, do they just say, hey, offense, we need you. We're going to take this away, and hopefully it works out kind of deal. Because, again, it doesn't matter how you get there. You got to win the games. So just win them. I don't care. Double, triple, Jamar Chase. Let Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins get 150 yards each. If you win the game, then I'm good with that decision, right? It'll just be really interesting what direction they go as they try to figure that all out and get a couple important guys healthy.
Yeah, and for the Pittsburgh, and by the way, it was 18.1 points per game last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 18.1. And for anybody, look, Kenny Pickett, it's always difficult for me, obviously, from the area here where I'm from. He threw as many touchdown passes last year as Deshaun Watson. That is an alarming thing to think about, considering the amount of time played. And Deontay Johnson, yeah. Bro, you almost had 1,000 yards, and somehow you did not find the end zone. So, but keep working on those end zone dances, because it must have been murder to do that for 17 weeks and actually not get to use one of them. We love you, Steelers fans. It's the weekend here. But Jared, obviously now, Dawgs By Nature, right?
Dawgs By Nature. Dawgs By Nature. Yeah.
Obviously, Jared now, and he's like the perfect guy. Does his 2 years and then goes another 2 years. Everybody's had a player that's been on their team, and he was on that team. Like AL Central players or NL East players, where they're always in the division, just different uniforms. But obviously now SB Nation Dawgs By Nature. Jared's doing a fantastic job over there. I always appreciate when he's able to come back here. And I still literally remember reaching out to him when this broke it, I was like, oh, well, that's right. And I was like, hey, just letting you know. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, it just wasn't really for me, whatever, at the time, and da-da-da-da-da. And he's always been, obviously good to me here in my role here. And I'm always willing to come on, obviously, share some thoughts, share some takes, of course. Make sure you're following at Jared K. Mueller, of course, Dawgs By Nature, SB Nation, does a fantastic job over there, always evolving. And I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, you'll see how the 2023 season is going to, because as much as everybody's like, oh, well, the content right now, everybody's kind of got the same stuff. Yeah, because we know what we can put out right now. And in the back of our mind is, well, what are we going to do?
All the other
season? What are we going to do during the season? So as much as we are officially putting out content, a lot of it is behind the scenes about what can hopefully the content be when it gets to money time.
Hey, you got to have a plan, guys.
You got it. And hopefully, in the words of Hannibal Smith, I love it when a plan comes together, of course. So again, always thanks to Jared here. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. 7th season now here with Locked On Browns. It seems crazy to say 7th season. Once again, signed up for an 0-16 season right out of the box. I think my wife was going to have me committed. However, after this long run, she's a lot more happier with how things have gone here, and we appreciate it. And a lot of that is because of the everydayers, and you make Locked On Browns your first listen. Subscribe on the YouTube channel, notifications on, of course, so when the content drops, you're all there to consume it. We're always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB. Let's go, Browns.